It's no secret the Miami Dolphins need to be better on the offensive line, but which of the options that may be there at 13 would be worth the pick? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. I called y'all out yesterday on the show, and I said, we're going to do big uglies for 13, and I want to see everybody show up. Comments had all kinds of energy all week long, talking about defensive backs and defensive tackles and linebackers, and said, Kyle, we need to fix the offensive line. I said, okay, well, bet. We're here on Friday, and we're going to talk three offensive linemen that are candidates to be picked with the Dolphins pick at number 13. Then early next week, we'll start to kind of stack this board a little bit. Then we'll start looking to pick 48 and some of the options for players that make a lot of sense for the Dolphins that would be like the alternatives to if you don't go offensive line at pick 13, who might be there at 48? That could be like the second half of a pairing with a different player, presumably on the defensive side of the ball with your early pick, right? Because that's part of the game that we have to play on the outside looking in until we really know how the actual board itself is going to unfold when we get to the end of April. We're less than a month away from the 2025 NFL Draft, so gassed up for that. So we're looking at Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Tyler Booker here today on the show. It's the Big Uglies edition on the offensive line. No secret this group needs to be better, and they are certainly better at one of the guard spots with James Daniels. Right now, based off of who the Dolphins have, I would be penciling in Larry Borom as the other starting guard. I know there's some speculation on whether or not he's a guard or a tackle and what he signed here to be and if he's any good or not. And I think you can review some of the guard tape that he had when he played in kind of wide zone-y type of system. It's a fit that I don't feel anywhere near as comfortable or confident in the projection as I did this time last year when we were talking about Aaron Brewer projecting into this scheme. But I see a better player than what he was given the chance to showcase last year at Chicago. But I don't think you just check the box and say, okay, well, you signed Larry Borom and James Daniels, and Liam Eichenberg will be the utility guy, and we get Keon Smith back, and there's your 7. And we'll kind of, take it as it lies and go from there. No. We want to fix this thing. And I want to fix it all the same as all of you. The question is, who's the right choice if there is one at 13? So let's start with Will Campbell. Was a consensus top 10 prospect in this draft coming into the season, going all the way back to last July and August. And he played a solid year this year. I know there's a lot of discourse around the length that exists with Will Campbell. I want to read through some of my synopsis with Will Campbell, and then we could talk about kind of the journey that I've been on with Will Campbell as somebody who's worked in the draft space this entire cycle, and where I've kind of landed with Will Campbell. LSU Tigers, this is from my report for the 33rd team. I promise I'm not just going to sit here and read all the text, but I want to give you like the elevator 30-second summary, and then we could go from there. LSU Tigers offensive line Will Campbell has been a standout left tackle for the Tigers program, but likely faces a more favorable projection to the interior in the NFL. Campbell's density, foot speed, and movement at the point of attack would be more isolated as positive variables in his game, with bumpers on either side of him up front, mitigating some of the pass set framing and length concerns that litter his film at left tackle. Campbell is tough and possesses a ton of natural strength throughout his game. If charged with playing in close quarters and pass protection, he has a chance to be a tone-setting presence up front. Any team would be well within their rights to test him at tackle if preferred. He's not a tackle for me, and it's less about the arm length and 33 versus 32 and 5/8. It's the wingspan, it's the reach, it's the framing and the foot speed to go with that all of that, to me, just blends together as a player that I would feel much more comfortable in. And when I grade him as a tackle versus when I grade him as a guard, it's a significant difference between the two numbers. And I have him graded as a guard on the rankings that we're going through here, not just for 30-13, but also my Dolphins specific board that we're going to get into the final 2 weeks before the draft. But what I can tell you, he's a top 10 player, and he's a top 10 player for the overall grading for all 32 teams and kind of a universal grading approach. And then when you tailor the traits that I grade on and put weight on them as it is important to playing within the Dolphins scheme, it's a top 10 player on the board in that regard as well. I'll give you that spoiler alert. Tons and tons of displacement ability, but it pairs it with really good movement skills, moving forward and horizontally along the line of scrimmage. I think when he's tested with speed, the South Carolina game this past year was a good showcase of kind of those guys got after him with speed up the field a little bit from wider angles, and his ability to frame it and consistently play half-man relations and play inside out and not open the gate too much and invite guys back inside. I think it's just a cleaner projection for me personally. Couple of the things that stood out to me on his game, good range on the backside of plays. That's very relevant for some of the run game stuff that the Dolphins do. If you are, whether you're play side guard or you're a backside guard, and you got to get up and get onto the second level, a lot of your explosive runs come because your uncovered offensive linemen along the front, whether they're tackles or center or guard, regardless of who they are, the explosive runs come in this wide zone scheme when those guys can get up onto linebackers on the second level and attach and ride, because that's where the back can cut off of the angle of those blocks, and those offensive linemen are taking these blocks as they find them. That, to me, is where Will Campbell, from a movement skills perspective, projects quite nicely into what the Dolphins do. But then you also have the ability to play off of combination blocks. And if you want to be a little bit more between the tackles, if you want to be a little bit more stout and have guys that have a little bit better center of mass and center of gravity and can move you from point A to point B against your will in a vertical setting, Will Campbell can also do that. I think as a guard, he is a scheme transcendent type of player. And I know there's a whole other subsecting conversation about whether or not the Dolphins would draft an interior offensive lineman at pick 13 and positional value and this, that, and the other thing. And I get it. It's a very real thing that has existed throughout this brain trust of that is running the Miami Dolphins. I understand that, and I understand the hesitancy to buy in on anybody that's a thing that happens. And I'm inclined to believe it's true too. I don't believe in my heart of hearts that they will draft a guard or somebody to play guard with the 13th overall pick. But if they were, a player like this, who has tackle ability or tackle potential, but also has a universal application. You know, there's guys that are wide zone fits. There are guys that are duo and inside zone fits. There's guys that are good pullers. There are guys that are good pass protectors. A cat like this can do all of it. And the fact that it is a transcendent talent that goes beyond like an individual scheme fit, and he ranks as highly as he does, not just for me grading for all 32 teams, but grading for the Dolphins, there's a world and a realm and a possibility where what happens if Will Johnson's gone and Jahdae Barron's gone and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are gone and, you know, Shamar Stewart's gone and the quarterbacks are gone and Armand Membu's gone and Tyler Warren's gone. What do you do in that? Are you going to pick a safety or are you going to pick an offensive lineman? You know, who do you have graded higher? No, there is a realm of possibility that I can foresee in which Will Campbell, as a player who I think can do everything at a high level, especially if he is charged with tackling less space, because it's the wingspan element of him that I think he's most tested with when he has to play against speed and wide angles on the edge. There's a world in where this is the best player available. And there's been examples of other football teams that have guidelines and pillars and barriers and things that they do not do until they do. And we'll get into a couple of those as we set the stage for Kelvin Banks from Texas as our next offensive lineman, we are spotlighting. That's coming your way next year on Locked On Dolphins, so stick with us. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. If you have your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and with game props. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting for you to bet on and stay in the action for yourself. Plus, the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no sitting and waiting around for the cash to hit your account so that you can go and get in on more of the action for yourself. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on all of the college hoops action all tournament long. I think about the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm in the Philly market. I grew up in the Philly market. A lot of my friends that I grew up with that knew me before I got into the industry are diehard Eagles fans, right? There'd be times where you'd mock draft them and you'd mock draft them a linebacker, or you'd mock draft them a running back. And the argument would be, it's a big area of need for Philadelphia. I think 2 years ago, Philly's off-ball linebacker group was an unserious collection of talent. But the argument that they would give you is Howie's never going to invest big in a running back or a linebacker. It's just how Howie Roseman operates. There's a positional value barrier that they don't want to cross as the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not going to pay or draft a running back and spend marquee assets on those players. Well, guess what they did this past year? They signed Saquon Barkley in free agency, and then they got Zach Bond, and they gave Zach Bond like $17 million a year to stay on the roster and play football for the Philadelphia Eagles after the season that he had this past year. So, yes, the historical precedent that exists within the Dolphins with Chris Grier and company running the show is spending a first-round pick on a guard. And this can be applied to Mike McDaniel and their offensive line philosophy as a whole as well. The historical precedent is that it is unlikely to happen. But it's unlikely to happen until you have the right combination of variables at play at that one point in time in which it becomes the common sense and right thing to do to take the best available talent to help your football team. So apply that logic to Will Campbell. And I think it's very easy to see the realm if he gets past San Francisco at 11 and New Orleans at 9 and Dallas at 12, who has to replace Zach Martin. If you get to that realm of possibility and they all go with players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, I can see it. I can see it. Now, does that apply to Kelvin Banks, who is a very popular mock draft choice for the Dolphins and has been all season long? This is another player who, going back to before the start of this past college football season, was considered to be a consensus top 10, top 15 player. And I won't bury the lead with this one. We'll start with this one. I have a late one, early two on Kelvin Banks. I think this is some rawness to his game that's a little difficult to reconcile when you're talking about a top 15 pick, especially if you're now pairing that with a projection inside, because I think some of the warts in Kelvin Banks' game are issues that don't just magically go away when you place him inside. Whereas Will Campbell, the big issue that I have with his game at offensive tackle is how he frames and sets guys on the edge when having to cover a large amount of grass. Now, Banks is powerful for sure. The comp that I have is a name you should know quite well. It's Austin Jackson. 6'4", 320 pounds, ran a 5.1 in the 40-yard dash, 32-inch vertical jumps, a good explosiveness. I'll read the scouting overview. We'll go through some strengths and weaknesses on the film. Texas Longhorns offensive tackle Kelvin Banks projects as a starting left tackle at the NFL level. Banks possesses dynamic movement skills and the frame to play tackle, provided he continues to refine his hands and showcase better sustainability and stickiness on his blocks. Big difference from Will Campbell. His athleticism is evident out of his stance and out in space, affording him a large range as a blocker. That will help with the wide zone scheme. Banks' feet are crisp and disciplined in his pass sets, building a strong foundation for his game. However, his ability to maximize his hands leaves him too often falling off of blocks or overextending to lean and apply more strain. This compromises his base, and he's vulnerable versus savvy defenders who know how to manipulate his balance. This is like the Austin Jackson playing him at right tackle, and you've seen it the last 2 years when he's been on the field for a year and a half worth of those 2 years worth of games. He will blow the doors off of people in the run game. And Kelvin Banks showcases a lot of that ability as well. And it's not a matter of functional athleticism, but it's a lot of technical stuff. It's balance and center of gravity and playing within your frame and utilizing your hands and maximizing your hands to establish control at first contact, to not just create run through and create movement, and then it all deteriorates and breaks down around you because you can't sustain and establish and hold your fit on the block. And it shows up when he spins off of blocks where guys don't have to run steep angles to disengage from him. They can run relatively light angles through his gravitational pull to disengage off of blocks. He can get pulled forward off of his set by defensive linemen who have the ability and the length to kind of snatch and grab his balance and get it out over top of his toes and pull his shoulder pads forward. And then in pass protection, there's strike timing consistency that too often will let guys kind of run through the loop too tight with too tight of an angle. And all of those things get more compounded in my mind when you move him inside, because all you're doing is giving the opposing player a more direct pathway to the quarterback. Now, he could be a really good player. Evan's a top 32 player in the class. But Kelvin Banks, for me, is not just, oh, Will Campbell's gone, draft Kelvin Banks because he's the next guard or next offensive lineman in line who can play and should play for us because we need to fix the offensive line. I think there's some significant questions here, and you're talking about putting him in a realm where he's in direct conflict with Patrick Paul. And I was super skeptical of Patrick Paul last season, but at least we have some proof of concept there with about 300 snaps of offensive play. And when he was on the left side, he played way better than I thought he would. Way better than I thought he would. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. And to take another player that I think moving him where it's convenient for the line, but potentially further compounding his weaknesses as a player, where he would be best, you already have a player that you've invested in recently. I am as big of a proponent as anybody of don't prevent good, prevent you from drafting great. But I don't know that Kelvin Banks is a great offensive tackle right now. I think he can be a quality starter in the NFL for sure. But given that leap of faith that's required to get there and the potential time it would take for it to happen, I think I'd rather circle back. If this is the best available offensive lineman on the board, I would rather circle back and come back to it at a later point where maybe the ceiling's not quite as high, but there's more of a refined product for a player that you have a better idea of what you're getting. So if you get into a trade back scenario and you're picking in the 20s and Kelvin Banks is there and you want to go that route and you gave yourself an extra second round pick so you can get another bite of the apple at one of these other spots, whether that's corner, defensive tackle, or wide receiver or tight end or whatever. Okay. I'm not going to hate the pick. I understand the thought process, especially because of the blocking range that he has with his athleticism. My ideal scheme fit and role for Kelvin Banks on the report that I have for 3013. Banks Jr. is not a finished product, but his athleticism and frame are going to warrant opportunities to play early. This is an impressive player from a movement skill standpoint and can become an impactful starter, although he would benefit early in his development from playing in a scheme that invokes a number of the same elements as the one that he played at in Texas. A high volume of run action and play action reps and screen passes. These keep Kelvin Banks Jr. aggressive in playing forward into blocks and in leaning more heavily on his appealing traits as compared to asking him to play with time under tension. That fits the Dolphins scheme. So I see why it's a pairing, and there's a lot of parallels with Texas's scheme this past year and Miami's. So I get it. But there ain't no way you're going to sell me on this product as what it is right now as being the best available pick with the 13th overall pick. And I might not get the same ceiling somewhere else later in the draft, but I'll probably get a higher floor and a better proof of concept and knowing what I'm going to get. What about an actual guard? Tyler Booker is the one that everybody points to. Kind of a polarizing name. We'll talk about Tyler Booker. We'll talk about scheme fit and why it's relevant and where I think Booker fits on that spectrum next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So stick with us. Tyler Booker, University of Alabama, Crimson Tide. We know Chris Greer loves his Alabama Crimson Tide players. There's age 21 on 3 days before I turned 36. Yikes. April 12th, turns 21, young player. You like that outlook as well. And I know that's something that we've kind of dug into somewhat this week with some of the prospects that we've gone over. Kelvin Banks turned 21 2.5 weeks ago. So still a young guy. Will Campbell turned 21 in January. So all of these players are going to be 21 years old for their rookie season. Okay, and that thumbs up. And get some longevity here. But here's the book on Tyler Booker. 6'5", 325 pounds is what he was on the roster at. This is a hefty young man as it pertains to the stature. Junior, declared, ran a 5.38. Really don't care all that much about the athletic testing here because it's not really the book on who he is as a player. But the scouting overview paints quite the picture. Alabama Crimson Tide offensive guard Tyler Booker projects as a powerful starter at the NFL level. His raw mass is impressive, and the power in his hands allows him to shine as a tone-setting presence on the interior. Okay, no, I think you're already cooking with gas more than we're cooking with Kelvin Banks as far as like projecting an impact player, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Booker shines on inside run concepts, both as a puller and on vertical releases from the line of scrimmage to generate movement at the point of attack. Booker can solo block 4-eye and 3 techniques and create wash to blow open holes in the running game. As a pass protector, he has tackle length and can influence with a heavy anchor thanks to ideal weight distribution throughout his trunk and core. Very thick core frame lower half for Tyler Booker. He can continue to grow and develop in the nuances of pass protection and passing off rushers with his line makes to avoid leaky protection and take the next step in his game. In all, this 2-year starter has a notable ceiling for a team ready to invest in power at the next level. So this is the question that exists with Tyler Booker, who has played over almost 1,600 snaps the last 2 seasons, and then played in 400-something snaps in 2022 as a true junior, and split those reps almost equally between left guard and right guard. But the last 2 seasons, it's been left guard and then 77 snaps. He had to play 1 game at left tackle to help out Alabama. What does your vision look like for your run game evolution? Because there's a world and a realm in which Tyler Booker makes more sense for what the Dolphins could be if they follow the pathway of what Sean McVay did with the Rams. And they went out and they had a wide zone exclusive front, and then teams started loading the line of scrimmage up, and they couldn't run and create the displacement to create running lanes with some of their power and inside concepts to be able to get teams out of some of those fronts. So then they had to go out and shop for different players, and they transitioned from a wide zone system to a lot more of an inside zone and duo, which is double teams across the board, right? And you're trying to create movement and a surge, if you will, at the point of attack. And that's why they drafted Steve Avila, the big-bellied TCU offensive lineman in the 2nd round. And that's why they signed Jonah Jackson to the contract that they signed him to before they gave up on him after 1 season. And it's why they traded for Kevin Dotson and extended him on a contract extension that was north of $15 million per season. These guys are all like 330 plus, right? Are you, as the Dolphins, intending to do that? If your answer is yes, no, and they've added more size at guard between what they have in James Daniels now is a 325 plus pound player with athleticism. I think he can be a best of both worlds where he could fit your outside zone stuff and he can fit your improved size profile for better point A to point B displacement ability. Then you have Larry Borum as kind of the wild card. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? But he's 330 plus pounds. And even if he's the swing tackle, I know people have concerns about if he would have to play, and I understand the concerns, but the contrast of his strengths versus Kendall Lamb's strengths as the swing tackle the past 2 seasons. Kendall was an awesome pass protector, but the ability to have athleticism and create movement and displacement and urgency up front in the run game, it really wasn't there. And it bogged down a lot of your running game after Austin Jackson went down in the second half of the season. So you have guys that check both boxes. So I can't look at these signings and unequivocally say, yes, they're going for size. Yes, they're doing the McVay duo inside zone type thing. I can't say that with certainty because the 2 guys that they signed actually have very good open field athleticism. And that's where I get caught up with Tyler Booker because he is a heavyweight of a guy with punch power on the A level of the offensive line. And he has good length. So he's got a large gravitational pull as it pertains to playing on the first level of the line of scrimmage and creating new movement. The challenges come when he has to try to do the second level and space work. It's not an element of his game that I feel like would translate at all to what the Dolphins do. And we talked about the key to a lot of those explosive runs is guards getting up and fitting on second level defenders and creating wash and staying sticky on those blocks out in space. So when I have the synopsis here of Tyler Booker, athletic enough to play and reach some ambitious landmarks along the line of scrimmage, but functional athleticism is not a hallmark of his game. He's shown the hip mobility to pull and kick the end in power or counter reps, or to get outside of pin blocks and try to lead his quarterback outside in some quarterback run designs. His ability to climb uncovered to the second level is modest and must be faster. More instinctive linebackers could run over his area of influence and be uncovered play side on the second level. That's not a match for what you want to do. And you can, if you'd like to, argue, well, then the scheme's dumb. You should change the scheme. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm going grocery shopping for items that fit the recipe we're trying to cook. And Tyler Booker is not that, no matter how much of a high floor player he feels like he's going to be. It's just not a fit for what if the Dolphins want to be more balanced on offense and they want to breathe life into their run game, then I kind of have a feeling Tyler Booker's not really going to be, unless they're overhauling the entirety of the run scheme, Tyler Booker's probably not going to be a great fit for what you want to achieve. Now, there are other options that I think are worthwhile acknowledgments, not all of them options at pick number 13 on the board. Gray's Abel. Where does Gray's Abel get drafted? Out of North Dakota State. Where does Donovan Jackson get drafted? Out of Ohio State. He's a player that's built similarly from a build perspective to Tyler Booker, but actually has the athleticism and the foot speed. And he also has tackle length and range, and also played tackle in a pinch to get Ohio State through a stretch of games. Well, I think Donovan Jackson, and maybe he's not as clean, maybe he's not as precise as Tyler Booker is, but Tyler Booker, it's a square peg for a round hole in my mind versus a Donovan Jackson if you want a size type profile player, or you want to get to round 2 and it's Marcus Mbow and Tate Ratledge as potential fits on day 2, or Jonas Avenea, who played right guard. There's options that are probably Miles Frazier, Cameron Williams, who played right tackle for Texas, Charles Grant from William and Mary. Ariante Ursery, I think, has some guard upside as well. Caleb Rogers, Jalen Travis, Wyatt Might. Like, you go down the board. And I don't love all of those options either. But if the centerpiece of your run game is attaching on blocks and getting up and climbing onto the second level to create backside cutoff or create frontside wash, he doesn't fit. And because of that, like, I'm not buying right now that this is the best available player at pick number 13, no matter how much of a need it is to get that position right. I would rather try to get a player who I know is going to fit what I'm trying to do as compared to just check the box and draft for need. Because that's how you get disappointed, is drafting exclusively for need and being non-negotiable with what's available to you and saying, I'm going to pick it anyway. It's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On Dolphins. Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, Tyler Booker, showcasing 3 potential interior offensive line options for the Dolphins at pick 13. Which ones I like? You could have probably guessed. I like him in the order that we did him here today on the show. But how do all of these players stack up? We're going to do that on Monday. You have that to look forward to. Keep it locked in. Right here on Locked On Dolphins, your team every day. I'll talk to you all again soon. Enjoy your weekend.